Hey everybody, welcome back to Inventing Construction. I'm Ross Griffin, and today we have our sustainability experts from the Cosmos team with us. You can see here Simon sitting next to me, Archie in Dublin, and Roger in Lowland in Denmark. So today's topic is it's around sustainability again, because it's such a hot topic, I guess, right? So what is the cost of sustainability? And the reason we're going to discuss that today is I think a lot of the developers out there and the designers as well really believe that sustainability is costing them extra. But we'll dig into that. The four subtopics that we have here is it's expensive, right? Again, we believe it to be expensive. Do we really understand where the value is within sustainability and how we manage that? How do we measure the cost impact of sustainability and those decisions? Where do we focus when it comes to sustainability, and how do we cost those elements? We'll discuss that in a little bit more detail. And then ignoring cost is ignoring opportunity. I think we have a lot of opportunity in the industry in terms of streamlining our processes to reduce costs so that we can take that value and invest it in sustainability and social infrastructure. We should get the guys to introduce themselves to us. So Simon, who are you? Your past, your present, and your future. It feels like we've done this already, but let's do it again, you know? Yeah. No, I can't remember. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm the sustainability engineer at Cosmos. Been there for half a year. Prior to that, I worked for a developer, also with sustainability. I've had a focus on sustainability in the building industry for the past 5 or 6 years, both academic and professional. Yeah, that's about it.
So what are we trying to do here for the future, Simon? What's our aspiration?
Trying to keep some focus on CO2 and not only costs.
Yeah, it's not about the money, yeah?
No.
Oh, yeah. It's all about
It's
the
about
CO2.
the future.
Bags of CO2 we'll be carrying around with us. Hey, Roger, so in Lowland in Denmark, what's the weather like down there?
Not so spectacular at the moment, but
that's all right. It's the same as we have here. We're grand. It's okay.
Yeah.
But Roger, maybe you can introduce yourself. This is your 700th time on the podcast, but that's okay. You know, you're a wealth of information, wealth of knowledge. But your past, your present, and your future for new listeners out there.
I am originally a quantity surveyor from England, an expat, been there through multiple different countries, worked for different parts all of the supply chain, subcontractors, contractors, clients, developers, consultants, and I'm that old that I got bored of doing the normal quantity survey stuff, so I like doing this kind of specialist kind of thing that everybody else tends to find very boring, except for podcasts like this.
Roger is the original carbon QS. Is that what you're saying, Roger?
Yeah, I used to live in Egypt for a while. I'm there on some of the hieroglyphs inside the pyramids.
I like it. But Archie, you're in Dublin today. It looks like it's getting dark there, Archie. You know, what's it like there today?
The sun is still shining and it's not raining, so I'm happy. I'm still getting over a cold that I got in Limerick, so. The cold gets into your bones in Limerick.
Yeah. That's why no one visited. So I don't know. I don't get it. But come here, Archie. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your past, your present, and aspirations for the future. Now, come here. I'm going to hold you to a time limit here now. So you have 2 minutes, and the clock starts now.
I'm Cosmos's senior sustainability specialist, and I suppose my interest is in looking at that convergence between cost, quality, and carbon. My background is architectural technology and sustainability planning, but my interest at the moment is in just getting better standardized systems for life cycle assessment and using that as a way to decarbonize our built environment.
Excellent. So today, guys, we're going to talk about carbon, about LCA, but in particularly our topic for today is what is the cost of sustainability? It's a big question for any investor, any client, any developer, any architect, engineer. Basically, every stakeholder within our ecosystem is asking this question today. And we have 4 subcategories that we're going to discuss around. And the first one's a question. It's expensive, right? But we'll dig into that a little bit more in a minute. And do we really understand where the value is when it comes to carbon and cost? As you mentioned, Archie, there, it's visibility is important. And how do we measure the cost impact of sustainability within our projects? And lastly, ignoring cost is ignoring opportunity. I put that one in there because I have something I'd like to discuss with you guys around cost and opportunity within the construction industry. But let's come back. Sustainability, it's expensive, right? Anybody want to jump in there and start discussing that one? At least that's what the industry is saying, and that's what our clients and our investors believe, that sustainability is expensive.
I think it depends if you have like a clear strategy from the beginning and you choose the right materials, the sustainable materials, you can minimize the expenses for it.
Yeah.
So it kind of depends on how early on your design stage you focus on it.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting point. If it was always part of your project, then doesn't become a challenge for you, because that's what your project is set up against. But I know, Roger, we often looked at the impacts of sustainability, especially certifications and the different levels of certifications for clients, based on the standard benchmark of non-green certification or non-certified buildings. There was also always a cost to that. But I remember you telling me one time, if it's not managed, if certification process isn't managed, the cost can be, it can be anything, right?
It's a very interesting question. So I'll start off by saying, under normal circumstances, I'll preface this as, so this subject of what does, say, green building certification cost you is actually something that's very well analysed the world over, because aside from international green building certification like LEED or DGNB, there's a lot of countries that have their own systems. So if you look at Japan, if you look at Singapore, if you look at Australia, they are national systems, and they've all been analysed by the universities. And the interesting thing was that they kind of agreed on what the cost was for green building certification across the sort of bronze, silver, gold, platinum sort of standards. And there was like a kind of the lowest level, if you're using, if you're in a good environment with good products and good professionals to help you to achieve the minimum, could be something like 0 to like 2%, then the next level 2 to 4, 4 to 8, and the highest level maybe like 8 to 12. That's where I say that's under normal operating circumstances, because one of the things that's been more interesting in recent times is seeing what has happened to material prices since COVID. So for example, we saw timber and we saw metal prices doubling, and in some cases almost tripling. And this is one thing that I find particularly, it kind of scares or piques some people's interest when you talk about the possibility of this carbon crunch that could be coming up. Because in terms of slightly scary numbers, we have a carbon budget that we are supposed to stay under up to 2030, which it doesn't look like we're going to achieve. Now, that's only 7 years away. Most countries have elections every 4 to 5 years, which means most countries will have another national election before we hit 2030. We've been kicking the carbon can down the road for quite a while because we've been through a succession of different crises that have pulled people's attention away from sustainability and issues like this. So one of the things that I've got an eye on that I think is a big risk out there is the possibility that if we hit 1 to 2 years of particularly bad weather, there will suddenly become a very strong political interest for people to start copying like Denmark and really diving in with some teeth, because the people who are currently in power will not want to be seen as the person responsible for not getting to 2030, and the people wanting power want to portray themselves as the person who can get you there. So I see there's a good risk of being a lot of political motivation to suddenly jump very hard and very fast to follow something like Denmark. And the problem with that is that there is a insufficient level of supply to have an England and a France suddenly jump right in trying to do what Denmark's doing. And if you imagine that scenario suddenly just happens, how long does it take you to get manufacturing plants, to get the financing, to get the design, to get it built, to get it up and running? And the final scary number for you on that one, if you say that is 5 years just to get something out the door and started, the final scary number is actually a historical one from Prohibition, of all things, in the United States, where they used to have the alcohol trade there and then they blocked it out. That's an existing trade that everybody knew that was coming back. It took, in different parts of the country, anything from 5 to 15 years for it to get back to where it was. And that was a pre-existing industry. So as you hit this 2030 and beyond, there is the risk and possibility that the cost of decarbonizing your buildings could become particularly expensive. If you get particularly if you get a number of things kind of going wrong at the same time, like if you're awake during your economics classes, if you remember them talking about Kondratiev cycles and things like that. So if you just get this crisis happening on its own, but if another one comes along, like cost of living, then you get compound, like with the Kondratiev cycle. So there are risks that the cost of going green could be very, very high if things don't go well.
So what we're actually saying is that right now, even if you think it is expensive, it's not expensive because it's going to become more expensive if this perfect storm comes for all the developers, investors out there. But Archie, from your perspective, with your conversations at the moment in relation to the development of sustainability in Ireland, is it something that people still consider as a nice to have rather than a need because they view it as expensive?
I think because some of them are looking at sustainability now through the lens of risk. It's almost a corollary of that. It's can we afford not to do it? And I mean, before you talk about, well, LEED has a green premium. If we go for a LEED Platinum building, we're going to have a better return on this. We're going to attract tenants that can afford to pay higher rents. At the moment, the fear is that you have an asset that, won't be able to keep up with its market peers or won't be able to keep up with market expectations. So at the moment, if you have a new building, it's an A-rated asset and it's in the top 5% of its asset class. But if the measurement system changes and they start to say, well, we need to measure carbon, all of a sudden the rules change and that building that you thought was sustainable could be at risk of what we call stranding. So it's no longer, within the appropriate energy or carbon classification for buildings that are looking to attract green finance or avoid carbon taxes. But it's a rapidly shifting space. There's lots of conflicting legislation, some of it with very difficult acronyms. You've SFDR and ERS, and you're just trying to maintain value in an asset. You're not trying to be the best in class. You're just trying to make sure that at the end of an investment cycle that building can maintain its value. And I suppose in order to do that, it needs not just to be designed and delivered as a low energy building, but it needs to be operated as a low energy building. And it's difficult to do that because you need maintenance managers, you need planned preventative maintenance platforms. You need to understand, when is the replacement cycle for your refrigerant gases? How do you repair certain systems? how do you operate the BMS? Simple questions like that. Or the fundamental one that's been discussed at the moment is, how do you actually exchange data with your tenants or your customers? I suppose the question at the moment is, what is the cost of not doing it? And what we're seeing is, there are more innovative systems coming to the market, and some of them can be quite simple. Things like wireless energy monitoring software or air quality monitoring systems, and they can be quite insightful, because what we found over the last few years with monitoring buildings for air quality is that it's almost more important than the energy monitoring, because it tells the landlord, well, which spaces are being operated. Are they being over ventilated or under ventilated? And the whole pattern of how we use offices, the whole pattern of how we use, educational university buildings has changed profoundly.
Yeah, and I would say it comes back really to what Seaman was saying there a minute ago. It comes down to your strategy at the end of the day. If your strategy for your project as an asset owner is longevity over a 30, 40, 50 years life cycle, well, then the implementation of your sustainability strategy fits into that. And it's not just about getting a return on investment in 2 years. It's about over the entire life cycle. And the legislation with LCA will help that, and LCC as well with life cycle costing is hugely important. But on to the next point here. This next one is interesting for me anyway, at least. Do we really understand where the value is? And what I mean by that is sustainability being a big word, and it's pushed on every project now, and it's every company, including ourselves, are behind this sustainability drive, if you like. But we're kind of making decisions from a sustainability perspective, but do we really understand where the value is in terms of sustainability? We talk about material selection. Is that where really the value is? Is the value much greater than just the material selection or the LCA calculation?
I think, as Archie mentioned before, is also the risk on not doing it. Yeah. Like ending up with a stranded asset. Yeah. People, if you look at energy certificates on buildings, people want the A or B, so it's as a minimum. So it's kind of visible for the owners. I think you can end up with the same as a building owner if you haven't thought about, if you building what you would call a dinosaur, just an old traditional concrete building. People 5 to 10 years from now will just see it as a dinosaur building.
Yeah, like a diesel engine almost car, which are beginning to be faded out, right? Where diesel engines will stop soon, and the combustion engine for diesel will stop, especially in the cars. But it's the principle is the same. It's not about is it expensive now. It's about really, well, what's going to be in 5-10 years time? What's going to be the norm then? And is your building going to become stranded? But very shortly there, Archie, explain what stranded means there to our listeners when we talk about building assets or buildings or assets becoming stranded from a sustainability perspective.
Yeah, sure. So you have this idea that each country and each sector has a fair share of the remaining carbon budget. So the carbon budget is, if we're not to exceed 1.5 degrees of warming, then there's only a certain amount of carbon that can be emitted into the atmosphere and other greenhouse gases. So what they will say is, in Ireland, your share of that remaining carbon budget is X, and the construction industry is 30% of that X. So that sets a kind of a dropping carbon ceiling that every year starts to decrease. Now, your building will have a carbon footprint, and the fair share that your building can emit can be plotted. Your building can be plotted against its fair share, and it has to stick within that, or else it falls outside of the regulatory boundaries. What that means is, let's say the ceiling for that building is like Denmark. It's set as an annual budget of 15 kilograms per meter squared, and you exceed that. Well, then can you increase the rent on that building? Or will that extra carbon, will that be taxed as a high level of carbon tax? So what we're trying to do with buildings is make sure that they, first of all, understand where is the point where they exceed their fair share of carbon, and then try and look at what are the best fit solutions to try and decarbonize. Someone explained it as, it's like an Indiana Jones movie where, the ceiling and the walls are coming in and you're trying to avoid that. So, as we go down this tunnel towards 2050 or even towards 2030, you will see certain assets, that will start to
go outside that line, and that's what we mean by when it becomes stranded. It's no longer an asset that sits inside the parameters, it sits outside. So the asset owners then will need to put a strategy in place for bringing that asset back inside the line over the next number of years. It's an interesting one. It's the same as what we do with cost. We index cost from today's rate right through to the future, which is up until, whenever the building is contracted to the contractor or whenever the building is complete. We predict where we believe the cost to go. So we also need to predict where we believe carbon to go for our clients for that project, to future-proof it from a carbon perspective, but future-proof it from a cost perspective also. So really, to answer the question here, do we really understand where the value is? The value is you need to do something right now, because if you're not doing anything, you're already going to be stranded in the next number of years for your projects. So sustainability suddenly becomes front and center of your strategy for your project. But we are talking about the cost of sustainability, and I think from sustainability as a whole, one of the points here is, how do we measure the cost impact of sustainability? I don't know, Roger, is it through LCA? Is it through other aspects like certification? We talked about, gold and platinum certification. Is that how we measure cost impact of sustainability? Is that our approach as cost managers, QSs?
The LCA gets a lot of attention at the moment, and it's going to be like the center stage, but there's other things broader things that we need to tap into. It's like, for example, a good example is like LEED. LEED has been around since 1992, which is the same year as the first, which is the Rio World Summit. So this is when all this journey kicks off. And yet, if you ask somebody if they've ever done a price per point analysis of how they score their LEED points, most of them will just look at you kind of blankly, like, what language was that you just spoke to me in? And it's something that, this is a thing that's been going for 30 years. So there's, even amongst the things that exist, there is room for improvement in understanding and improvement in efficiency. So it's not just assigning cost to the LCA. There are other, because there's so many visions. Part of the problem is there's so many visions out there from different bodies who are all trying to get to the same goal. And part of the problem is that it can be a very confusing space because they're not very well aligned. So as Archie was saying, the LCA or some things like taxonomy, every now and then you need one of these things to almost push through to force the others to kind of follow in its gravity, so to speak. But then it doesn't mean that they're the only game in town. You still, when you talk about the risks and the opportunities, you need those opportunities to look at these other things, even something as old as like a green building standard, and doing a price per point analysis to work out the most cost-effective way to get, not just the most cost-effective way to get you the points, but to get you to the type of, as Simon was saying, to get you to the type of design maybe that you envisage. Because with some clients, we see that they put priority ratings against different things. So they might say high, medium, or low. So you can start to mix that with cost and improve their understanding and end up with a better end result.
it sounds like there's a number of different aspects here to sustainability and how we measure the cost impact. It's looking at LCA and the design solutions and material selections, but also the certifications and the understanding of the cost impact of the different building certifications. Is there any other aspects of sustainability that we need to consider and have a focus on as cost managers, or is it just those two LCA certified buildings?
It's worth looking at the themes that are coming through from EU legislation. That, of course, climate mitigation is front and central, and that's all about energy and carbon. But you're also seeing adaptation and resilience, and especially the floods this autumn, the droughts this summer. How are our buildings going to be adaptable to a different climate than we had, in the last decade? And in some cases, a fundamentally different climate.
Sorry, Archie, is that adaptation in relation to changing climate, or is it in relation to changing the use of the building over time?
Well, I suppose this gets back to one of the biggest challenges with sustainability is it's a whole new language. There has to be a kind of a transition, not just in the tools and the materials we use, but also, fundamentally in how we communicate about buildings, how we design a brief around buildings. And, we have seen that carbon is a good starting point because it's quantifiable. But you have other KPIs for ESG and sustainability and just meeting your climate neutral goals that are more difficult to define, and they're quite subjective. So when we talk about climate mitigation, what that generally means is we're trying to make sure that we reduce the impact that we're having as designers and developers on the environment. And how we're doing that is to reduce our carbon footprint and transition towards a low carbon economy. So that means getting off fossil fuels, electrifying our heating systems, using renewables, using smart grids. But the other side of the coin is, and this is often called double materiality. So we look at, okay, first of all, there's the impact we have on the environment, but also what's the impact that the environment is going to have on us? So one of them is looking out the front window of the car and saying, well, where am I going? But the other thing is looking out the back window and seeing a tornado catching up on you. It's what is the climate doing on us? And that's where you're looking to build resilience, or what's called adaptive capacity. And it's making sure that, if you're building student accommodation or apartments, are you designing it for a summer in 2006 or a summer in 2036?
It's almost like crystal ball gazing, so Archie, looking into the future to predict what the weather conditions are going to be like, so we then can design our buildings to be adaptable to altering weather conditions. I just have a couple of movies in my head here, like The Day After Tomorrow, Waterworld with Kevin Costner. Hi, Kevin. The other one is the Mad Max. You can whichever one you want to look at, right? So it's desert, it's water, it's snow. It's all kind of crazy that way. Is that what you're saying, that we need to be looking into the future and designing our buildings for adaptation?
Yeah, no, it sounds like, you could make this sound like you're planning for the zombie apocalypse, but it's no more complex really than planning for traffic management or planning for a 1 in 100 year flood. It's simply just that if you follow, the current direction of travel for weather events, you can kind of see that your buildings need to, be more adaptive to that. So it may not be that, if you see summers getting warmer, it's not that you necessarily change your facade, but you make sure that, you have brackets put in place so that a brise soleil or canopies can be added. Or it can be as simple as nature-based solutions. So, a green roof instead of a black roof will help with cooling. White paving instead of concrete will also help. and planting trees, that also helps. But really what we're seeing is, there needs to be a broader, more holistic version of sustainability, and not just, previously we would have been very myopic around energy efficiency. Energy efficiency was the key metric for sustainability. What we're seeing now is, waste and circularity, things like biodiversity, net gain, water use, they're all having an impact. So we have a broader discussion around sustainability. But what we are finding is that at the nexus of all those themes around sustainability, carbon is that core metric. And if you get that one right,
it's
the others fall into place.
For now, yeah.
So it gets back to value, that we might say today that, well, let's look at it like 3 years ago, we were talking about NZEB and nearly zero energy buildings. We were talking about renewables. Then the conversation changed to be about embodied energy. Last year it was circular economy. Next year it's going to be around adaptation. So the I suppose different themes come into focus as we mature in terms of our understanding of climate impact. So, if we have a building that's on the drawing board now, we have to think of the day that comes to market. And I suppose previously the model was, particularly in Ireland, that, you fund it, you design it, you build it, and then you bugger off. Whereas the current scenario, particularly for housing, is that, you build it, you operate it, you manage it, you hold it for 15 years before you sell it on to an investment fund. But, it's like the day you buy is the day you sell. You also have to be thinking of that exit.
All that is now changing for us, but I still am a little bit... I lack a little bit of understanding of how we measure the cost impact of sustainability, but carbon is certainly the focus area, certifications is the focus area, and then we look for adaptation or themes, which is adding additional layers to your strategy, as Simon says, your strategy about becoming more focused on future-proofing buildings and elements like that. Okay, I think that's clear for me now. I think I have an idea of how we approach this in the future from a commercial and cost perspective. But just on to the last point here, and this is one that I it's not just about sustainability, it's about value as well. Ignoring cost is ignoring opportunity. And what I mean by that topic, and we'll kind of get into a conversation about it at the moment, is that if you ignore cost control, you will lose value. So not managing your budget, not managing design development, not managing sustainability strategy from a cost commercial perspective means that there'll be value lost in poor strategy, poor management, poor control. And that value has a value to it. Now, if we take all our public projects across the country, Denmark or Ireland, that value, when collated into a big pile of money, can offer so much additional value to sustainability as a whole. So if we take, the Danish construction industry invests about 42 billion euro per year. The Irish industry is about 21 billion. It's quite significantly smaller. If you're taking a percentage of that and saying there's a lost value in how we deliver our projects today, and we can take that lost value, let's just hypothetically say 10% for easily round numbers here, So you're saying there's 2 billion in the Irish industry that we could take. There's potentially 4 billion euro in the Danish industry we could take as lost value due to poor project delivery and poor cost control. Imagine what that would do from a social and sustainability perspective within our industry. I don't know if I'm being a little bit too simplistic on it, but I guess I'm talking about here is cost and sustainability are intricately linked, and we can't dismiss cost just because sustainability now becomes front and center. Or maybe we can, Simon. Maybe we can just forget about cost and we just get on with sustainability and carbon and we start measuring that. All the lost value that we have in our industry today, if we were able to capture all that value and put it into sustainability, our industry would be able to progress so much quicker and faster by moving forward. And that means by digitizing our workflows, becoming more structured and standardizing our project delivery, looking at modern methods of construction versus traditional. And it's a big question for Ireland. I think Denmark are well ahead in terms of standardization and modern methods of construction. But I think that there's a huge amount of availability in money there by improving what we're doing that can be, that can finance such a huge transition in sustainability.
And that's the fundamental issue is, we haven't quite got to understand just how, this EU level financing is working, how these people, planet, profit funds, the EIB funds and the green bonds, how they operate. And what they want is they want different organizations to come together with a batch of similar projects and just have the scale of those projects. It'd be like all the housing associations getting together and saying, look, we want to deliver projects for retrofitting town centres, or we want to deliver projects for utilising off-site construction, and going at it, creating their own fund to deliver this. And really that's, that needs kind of a whole of industry approach. And I think with Construct, Innovate and with some of these organisations, that they're starting to move that way. It's down to how the industry sets targets for the next few years. And we talk about that carbon crunch, but either we prepare for a radically decarbonized built environment that's going to happen in the second half of this decade, or we deal with the effects of it. We deal with you either put together a fund, a sinking fund for your assets to address the increasing price of carbon and the way the market is going to start favouring greener products, or else you just wait for the carbon taxes to hit. And I think as an industry, we need every player. So the collaboration is important. That, I was listening to a seminar this morning and it had Cushman and Wakefield. It had the quantity surveyors, the architects, the engineers, all kind of talking about solutions. And they kept coming back to retrofit and change of use. But the other side of the coin then is we need training, and even the tools we use to plot out decarbonisation, CREM and science-based targets. I mean, they are fundamental tools. We need training in those tools.
As an industry as a whole, there's a huge transitionary period here. But I think time is against us now, so we'll just wrap that one up for today. But it's interesting. I do think that there's an opportunity here. The values available to us within our industry to completely shift our industry, but not just focusing on sustainability, focusing on improving how we deliver projects to reduce that lost value, so we can take that lost value and put it into sustainability as an addition. But thank you very much, guys. Really enjoyed the chat, and hope to speak to you soon. Thanks very much for listening. There's a LinkedIn link below in the show notes. We would love to connect with you.
We hope you enjoyed it and have you with us in the next one. Thank you very much.